Hi, I'm Cassie Clark, and I'm going to share my video with you this week on James Stephen Hogg, the 19th governor of Texas. He was governor between 1891 and 1895. He had a pretty significant impact on the economic landscape of Texas, not only while he was governor, but during his time as Texas Attorney General as well. A little background about Mr. James Hogg. He was orphaned at a pretty early age. His dad was in the Civil War as a brigadier general. His brother was a lawyer, and he aspired to be a lawyer as well. Their father had also practiced law. Him and his brother settled into earning a living by agriculture and practicing law. This pretty humble upbringing and love of the land and agriculture is going to be the catalyst for many of his future achievements. Fun fact, he's the first native-born Texan to be elected governor of Texas, and he's somewhat of a legend in Texas politics. Early career was as a journalist. He worked on a couple of newspapers, ended up owning a couple as well. He began his political career as a justice of the peace. He did run for state legislature in 1876, suffering his only political defeat during his lifetime. He was a district attorney, considered a very aggressive district attorney in Texas, and he would become Texas Attorney General in 1886. So why was James Hogg so important to the future and economy of the state of Texas? First and foremost, Governor Hogg was a man of the people, and he really aimed to protect the people and land of Texas to ensure lasting economic benefits and prosperity for the states. He understood that for Texas to be in control of its future, its economic future, that land ownership had to be regulated to preserve the land and its potential. Out-of-state interests, they controlled millions of acres of land, and that had to be changed. Ownership, he had no problem with ownership remaining private, as long as that property was reasonably priced and sold back to citizen settlers of Texas. While he was Attorney General, he set up laws to protect the public domain, set aside for schools and institutions. He brought forward suits that would finally return those millions of acres back to the state. He enforced laws that required railroads and land corporations to promptly sell lands back to the Texans. He broke up an organization called the Texas Traffic Association, which was basically just a pool of corporations in the rail industry that were fixing rates and eliminating competition. And he would also write only the second state antitrust law in the nation at the time. While he was governor, Governor Hogg, there's some legislation that was passed that are commonly referred to as the Hogg laws. Law establishing the Railroad Commission, a railroad stock and bond law that cut down on watered stock, laws enforcing those corporations to sell that land back within a 15-year time period, an alien land law, as well as acts that were restricting indebtedness by bond issues. He encouraged investment in Texas. He would travel to other cities like Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago, promoting Texas business and encouraging businesses outside of Texas and states to interact with Texas businesses to grow its economy. He had a lot of interest in the welfare of schools, common schools, universities like University of Texas, Texas A&M. He also created the first historical archives here in Texas. And then after his tenure as governor, he would never run for public office again. He didn't leave politics. He was always very interested in good government. He backed William Jennings Bryan in the 1896 and the 1900 campaign. He actually spoke on Bryan's behalf before Tammany Hall. And he would later promote some really progressive reforms in the state of Texas. Again, a lot that had to do with the railroads and businesses and corporations in Texas, as well as the lobbyists in Austin. So Hogg versus the railroad magnates. The idea of this railroad commission, right, to investigate and report abuses by the railroads. and the large corporations first came up in 1876 by Governor Hogg. Unfortunately, the state needed money, and the railroads brought money. So because of that influence, this first proposal is going to fail. Meanwhile, the farmers are suffering because they have to pay whatever the fixed rate is. They have to move their goods, and economically, they're being devastated by the costs and control of these railroad corporations. In 1881, another attempt at a commission is proposed. This sparks Jay Gould's interest because he is one of the most successful railroad magnates in the country at the time. And at this time, he owned the Texas and Pacific Rails. And he was really looking to create the first railroad that's going to span the country. So he comes to Texas and he argued to the state legislature that any legislation is going to hurt Texas business. And set a bad precedent that gave Congress oversight within this commission, and that would violate the state constitution. So again, the commission proposal fails. In 1886, the Texas Farmers Alliance is going to take up this torch against the growing monopoly powers of these Eastern capitalists. The railroad laws had no teeth whatsoever, and nobody was really enforcing any laws. Even more troubling was there was a Supreme Court case called Wabash and Pacific Rail versus Illinois. In this decision, the Supreme Court said that state decisions on railroad rates were not binding on interstate corporations. So Texas and other states could not set any rates. And again, now this idea, this call for a commission comes up once again. James Hogg, who always had a vested interest in regulating these railroads, he kind of held out. After the Interstate Commerce Act was passed by Congress, he let that federal law create the waves he needed. He had his eyes on the Texas Traffic Association, and he said, quote, "If I cannot beat them down outright, I shall force them to wilt, wither, and dry up in the burning sunlight of justice while they're lying on and wearing me out." In 1888, he successfully sues the Texas Traffic Association, charging the members with creating a monopoly, preventing competition, and violating charters in the Texas Constitution. Jay Gould would become immersed in this as well. He had acquired through purchase or lease every rail line that was running through Texas, and Hogg charged that he had done this illegally. So as I mentioned, rail reform had been on one of Jim Hogg's priorities since he was elected Attorney General. He had really seen firsthand what had become of the communities after those railroads would bypass them, and those local lines fell into the hands of men like Jay Gould. He had been the face of opposition to railroad issues for many, many years. He ran for governor in 1890, and this proposal of a railroad commission, along with this amendment that would be required to the state constitution to get the legislation passed, was at the top of his campaign platform. He was able to prove to the Texas people that in Texas, rates were much higher than in the states that had already instituted the same such commissions. And the legislation ends up passing by quite a large margin. After his tenure as governor, he very happily returns to private life and becomes a private practice lawyer. But his real lasting legacy in Texas, he is one of a man that sought out and achieved laws that protected the public interest against powerful corporate railway interests specifically. He advocated for the law and was able to strengthen public support for law enforcement agencies in Texas. Those laws that he influenced regulated land, rails, investments, and they were meant to favor the people of Texas, and they were meant to protect them against magnates like Jay Gould and those large expanding corporate empires and land purchasers from outside of Texas. So he's got quite a history here in Texas and is very well respected. Thanks for watching the video. I look forward to your feedback, and I hope you learned a little something new today about Mr. James Hogg.